This is Radio National.
Stay tuned for Freedom News and Commentary, The Last Roundup.
The opinions expressed in the last roundup are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of this station or its sponsors.
I'm heading for the last roundup.
Hated man! Top of the world! I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I said I want the truth. You can't handle the
Yes. It is September 13th. And this is the last roundup. I'm your host, Al Parker. We have a special last roundup today. And you can see a face on the screen if you're watching on Stickam while you're listening on WBCQ. You can go to radionational.org and you will see the handsome, happy face of James Trafficant, released from the federal gulag and actually interviewed by mainstream media. And we're excited that toward the end of the program, you'll be able to view the most significant portion of that interview and listen to the most significant portion of that interview in case you missed it. So please stand by. That'll be coming up after Steve Magritz. Very appropriate considering the fact that Steve talked about his contacts with James Trafficant when they were both in the gulag. Well, this week, 9/11 was remembered, and I think it's important to understand the carnage of 9/11, and nothing says it better than in actuality. Well, there you have it. Ugly audio and hideous video of the events of 9/11, particularly the falling, the descent of the first tower to collapse or to be demolished. And there you see, if you're watching at radionational.org, standing on the rubble, looking rather happy and glib, is the main beneficiary, or one of the main beneficiaries of the 9/11 disaster, George W. Bush. There he is, looking none the worse for wear, grandstanding with a fireman during the terrible search for the lost, who were rendered unidentifiable. Only fragments of these people left after this terrible, dastardly attack on 9/11. And there he is again, posing with a fireman, standing on the rubble with a bullhorn, laying his healing hands on America. Glenn Beck was has been talking for the past several weeks, if not months, about the spirit of 9/12, the day after 9/11. Best exemplified by the image you're looking at, if you can see it. But it's George Bush and a fireman looking rather heroic, standing on the rubble with a bullhorn. What was the spirit of 9/12? Was it a country united, or was it a country utterly and totally confused? A country utterly and totally at the mercy of opportunists who would use the death and destruction of 9/11 to create what is turning into an empire that is a police state internally and a warmonger externally, a nation that seems to be bent on conquest in the Middle East. Who are the beneficiaries of that Middle Eastern conquest? Look at a map of the Middle East. Look at who brackets Iran and Iraq and Syria and all of those other rather primitive Middle Eastern nations where the only thing that really seems to have any value, certainly human life has no value there, but of course the vast resources of oil. Not so much to exploit the oil, but in the case of Iraq, after the 9/11 attacks, to suppress the Iraqi oil production so that George Bush's friends in Saudi Arabia could massively profit over a tremendous oil shock that, of course, sent the nation into its current economic downspin. Remember, it began the death blow to America, and her economy began on 9/11. The symbolism of the most graphic, let's say, I guess you would have to call them phallic symbols of American power, the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, being torn asunder, very symbolic of the fall of the old America and the rise of the globalist empire that is basically feeding off of the carcass of America. But this isn't to say that we shouldn't feel every one of those deaths that occurred on 9/11 intensely. Those people were sacrificed in some big game that is utterly repugnant to most Americans, and we cannot forget that. That's the value of remembering 9/11. Also, the idea that our Constitution was dealt a de facto death blow on 9/11. The USA Patriot Act, written before 9/11, breezed through Congress, even though it was wildly anti-constitutional and anti-individual rights and anti-privacy. These are things that we cannot forget. These are the memories of 9/11, the lost souls and the lost promise of America. The image you're seeing now, if you're watching on Stickcam, is a poster talking about fighting for profit for Halliburton and Blackwater. These megalithic companies profiting from the carnage on 9/11. But there was another big story this week, in addition to remembering 9/11 and how it changed America. And that, of course, was that moment when our president was explaining his health care plan to the two houses of Congress.
The best example is the claim made not just by radio and cable talk show hosts, but by prominent politicians, that we plan to set up panels of bureaucrats with the power to kill off senior citizens. Now, such a charge would be laughable if it weren't so cynical and irresponsible. It is a lie, plain and simple. There are also those who claim that our reform efforts would ensure illegal immigrants. This, too, is false. The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally. It's not true. And one more misunderstanding I want to clear up. Under our plan, no federal dollars will be used to fund abortions, and federal conscience laws will remain in place. Now, my health care proposal has also been attacked by some who oppose reform as a government takeover of the entire health care system.
Well, Lord forbid there should ever be a government takeover of the entire health care system. One of the interesting comments that Mr. Traficant made in his interview, the entire interview can be viewed on YouTube. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the program. The giant ripoff of the American workers and the union workers and their health care plans. They were dumped off their health care plans conveniently in a moment that would make them desperate for a life preserver. Do you understand what I'm saying? Look at what they did to General Motors. Look at what they did to the automotive industry, one of the biggest employers in the country, if not the biggest. Their health care plans were torn asunder by the bankruptcies and by the government takeovers. So all of these workers would be clamoring desperately for some sort of a life preserver. That was part of the cruel bait and switch. Now, one of the images you saw before, if you're watching on Stickam while listening on WBCQ, somebody was holding a sign, one of the Republicans, "What bill?" And that really is true, because there are several bills. The president was promoting a kind of a grab bag, because there is no actual bill. So he's promoting something that is not set in concrete, so it can be changed at any time. One of the interesting points he made, where he was called a liar, was that he would not be offering the health care plan to illegal aliens. He wasn't lying, because he will have an Emancipation Proclamation a la Abraham Lincoln for illegal aliens, where there will be no illegal aliens. So technically, legalistically, he would have been telling the truth. But believe me, all of the people here from other countries who are not supposed to be here are going to be covered. The face you see there is Cass Sunstein. Here's what Judge Napolitano had to say about Cass Sunstein.
So now there can be an up or down vote. So they can get away with not voting for him, but they've facilitated the vote.
How dramatic, and please understate it, Cass Sunstein, with what you know about him, good friend of Barack Obama?
Correct.
A law school taught with Barack Obama?
They both taught together at the University of Chicago Law School. This is one of his best ideological, academic friends and intellectual soulmates. He is
radical. Would you say he's a radical, not in the Marxist radical, but wildly out of step with the American people?
I would say he's on the far left of the left side of the Democratic Party. I would also say he will be on the short list for the next nominee to the Supreme Court to replace whoever resigns next.
Compare him to Ginsburg.
To the left of Justice Ginsburg.
Holy cow. Have we ever had anybody in a regulatory position that is this out of step with the American people?
We have never had anybody in a regulatory position with this kind of power that's this out of step with the American people. So his potential damage is limitless.
Sorry, say it again.
We have never had anyone with this kind of power in this kind of position that's this far to the left. So his potential damage is limitless.
Okay. Oh yes, Cass Sunstein, the man who believes that your pet should have an attorney. Now, I love animals. I wouldn't hurt a fly. I put flies and moths outside if I can catch them. But Cass Sunstein wants to eliminate the meat industry. He wants to regulate it, or as he says in his book, nudge. He wants to nudge all of these politically incorrect businesses out of existence. Now, Cass Sunstein is just one of the reasons that people are motivated. They're out in force. And this past week, we saw the culmination of the frustration of the American people, but it was largely unreported that the people took to the streets.
The largest outpouring of anger yet against the new administration.
No more crimes! No more crimes!
At one point, the crowd filled all of Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House to the Capitol.
I want our freedom, and we're losing it day by day by day.
They came from all over the country to protest the president's health care plan, the stimulus package, Washington's Wall Street bailout, and more.
We are here to give a message to Congress and the president that we are tired of them spending our money and not listening to our views.
I can't sit down while something this drastically harmful to our country is going on.
Homemade signs accused Mr. Obama of socialism, communism, and worse.
I think his agenda is to actually destroy this country.
I've met several people from Russia here today, and they're frightened.
The size of this crowd surprised even the organizers. Many people took buses to get here. Others just came on their own.
The president has warned us that if we disagree with him, he is going to call us out. Okay, Mr. President, we are out.
The rally was the final stop of the 30-city Tea Party Express, an anti-government spending movement which gained steam over the summer.
I need dough and plenty of it.
WBCQ is under stress right now due to increased power costs. Expensive oil means expensive electricity, the lifeblood of generating and projecting RF power. Please go to www.wbcq.com. Click on the donate link and give whatever you can to keep WBCQ on the air. Yes, alternative news and alternative radio and alternative news sites. The story that I'm going to be reading is from the Deseret News via Infowars.com. Alex Jones' superb compilation of significant stories. This is in regard to what may be the next 9/11 attack, and this is particularly apropos of this time because of the anniversary of 9/11. And the lesson that we should learn from 9/11 is to not be afraid, not give up our rights, but rather that we are on to the game of false flag terror. And I believe that this story is actually a psyop. It's fascinating. This was published on September 5th. Now, I'm quoting from Lee Benson, the author. Earlier this year, quite by happenstance, I read a book written by Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter James B. Stewart. Heart of a Soldier tells the story of two men who well before it happened, foretold not only of the terrorist attack of 9/11, but also the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center parking garage that preceded it. One of the men, Rick Rescorla, was chief of security for Morgan Stanley with an office in the World Trade Center. He died on 9/11, but not before he shepherded all but 6 of Morgan Stanley's 2,700 employees to safety because a well-prepared and well-executed evacuation plan. He'd have made it out too had he not gone back in the building looking for those 6. The other man, Daniel J. Hill, is still alive. With another September 11th approaching, I wanted to talk to the man who predicted 9/11. Although the primary focus in Stewart's book is on Rescorla, a bona fide hero for his actions on 9/11, I found Hill to be an even more fascinating character. And I might add, he is fascinating. And if this isn't a CIA op, I don't know who is. It was Hill who converted to Islam as a young U.S. Army paratrooper stationed in Beirut in 1958. It was Hill who learned fluent Arabic. It was Hill who joined the Mujahideen freedom fighters in Afghanistan and fought the Soviet invasion there in the 1980s. It was Hill who personally met Osama bin Laden. It was Hill who used information from Islamic extremists to warn Rescorla that terrorists would use the underground parking garage for a car bomb attack on the World Trade Center. It was Hill who asked the U.S. government to assist him in an assassination attempt on bin Laden in 1998. The request was rejected. And it was Hill who warned the FBI just weeks before September 11th that his Mideast contacts told him something big, in quotes, was about to happen in the United States. In New York, Washington, D.C., or Philadelphia, maybe all three. Through the internet, I managed to contact Hill at his home in Florida. He's now 71. I asked him if his reputation as a terrorism prognosticator without parallel has changed his life much. Quote, "Oh, that blew over pretty fast," he said. "Most of the people, even in my hometown, don't know any of that stuff," unquote. He didn't want to talk about the past. He wanted to talk about the future, the very near future. The man who predicted 9/11 is worried that its sequel is imminent. Quote, "Muslims that I talk to say things like, America thinks they're safe now. They've forgotten about 9/11. But watch, Daniel. Stay near your TV. It's going to be bigger. A bigger 9/11, he said. It's easy." Hill said the next terrorist attack will involve suitcase nuclear bombs that will be detonated in small, low-flying two-seater private airplanes manned by men hanging on to the belief that, like the 9/11 hijackers, they are about to die as martyrs and enter paradise. He is not alone in suggesting such a scenario. In 2007 book, The Day of Islam spells out the details, as do any number of internet sites, about a plot called, quote, American Hiroshima, unquote. The nukes, he said, will be detonated over New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Miami, Houston, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles. I asked Hill, why? Why now? 8 years from 1993 to 2001, 8 years from that 9/11 to this 9/11, he said. Symbolism. They're big on symbolism. Quote, Ramadan started 2 weeks ago Saturday, he said, referring to the Muslim holy month of fasting. It always hits around Ramadan. 8 years ago, Hill predicted the attack would come on October 16th, almost in the middle of that year's Ramadan. The timing of Ramadan varies from year to year. He was about a month off. Quote, I don't know the second, hour, or day. I just know they have the means, will, motivation, and desire to do it, he said, noting that it's believed that years ago the suitcase nukes acquired from the former Soviet operatives were smuggled into America across the Mexican border. Hill said he has warned the FBI, the CIA, and others in government for the past 2 years. He sent out proposals for a book on the subject. All he's gotten back are rejections. Quote, to most people, I am a deviant personality, he said, but there's no arguing his credentials. I'm a Muslim, he says. I'm a special ops expert. I'm a terrorist, and I live among Muslims. I fought the Russians with the same guys we're now fighting in Afghanistan. I met Osama. I volunteered to assassinate him. I know the enemy so well because I've worked, slept, and prayed alongside them for years. I've become one of them. I know their culture. I know their culture. I know their nature. I know how they think. I can quote the Quran like a Southern Baptist minister can quote the New Testament. I know these are people who do not tire, who do not quit. There are odds this won't happen, but they aren't big odds. I hope you're wrong, I told him. Yes, I hope so too, he said. That is one of the most interesting bits planted in the public consciousness that I have ever seen. And if you think about who this man Hill is, he is a classic. I guess you would have to call him a more sophisticated version of Timothy McVeigh, somebody who is absolutely murky and mysterious, probably with connections to CIA, Mossad, MI6, working both ends against the middle. But I think the idea of planting this article in the public consciousness is to generate fear so that you will not protest the surveillance in the police state. But it certainly is ironic that the current administration, doesn't really believe, and the previous administration and the last several administrations don't believe in any border control, when according to this person who predicted 9/11 and the precursor to 9/11 in 1993 was saying that these nukes came across the Mexican border of all places. So what does this really mean? Well, it's logical in a way. If you think about the money and the power grabs before 9/11 and after 9/11, think about the stock trading. Think about the money that was made by the people who knew what was about to happen. And now let's think about the looting of America. Think about the Madoff fraudulent Ponzi scheme. Yes, that is not a redundancy. It wasn't really, in my opinion, it wasn't a Ponzi scheme. It was a way of getting money out of the country. Now, Geithner and his associates in the Federal Reserve and this administration and the previous administration. Now, remember, there was massive profit-taking prior to 9/11 and after 9/11 through no-bid contracts and everything. It was a big money bomb for these people. It was also a big opportunity to institute oppression and a total surveillance society and an Orwellian state, but it was also a tremendous profit opportunity. Now, if you look at the looting of America that's going on right now, it is such a quantum larger. It's not in the billions, it's in the trillions this time around, which means that if the looting on Wall Street prior to 9/11 and after 9/11, if there is a proportion between the size of 9/11 and the next 9/11 in the amount of money that is being moved into the hands of fewer and fewer people, then this next 9/11 could be a nuclear conflagration of some type that will be blamed on the Islamic terrorists once again, regardless of who does it. We really don't know who's going to do it. Now we're apparently in a trade war with the Red Chinese. We have surrendered totally to the North Koreans. We have this little tango going on with the Iranians. We are, even a genius can't keep the greatest juggler in the world couldn't keep all of these balls in the air. Mr. Obama has health care. He has the bailouts. He has a crashed economy. He has multiple wars and expanding wars. He's antagonizing the Russians. He's fighting trade wars with the Chinese. So, we are at a level of such chaos that anything could happen. And I believe that this article is part of a process to create a kind of what you would call a subconscious suggestion that whatever does happen, in a way it'll be shocking, but it won't be surprising. As 9/11 was to some people. 9/11 was shocking if you're a human being, but to many people it wasn't surprising because of what went before it and what came after it. Any more than Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was shocking, but probably not surprising to some people in the know because of the subtext, because of the background of what was going on between the United States and Japan at the time, and Germany, and the forces that wanted us involved in war and the forces that didn't want us involved in a European war, like Charles Lindbergh, who was blindsided by Pearl Harbor and wound up going from the most popular man in the country to the least popular man in the country, while his nemesis FDR went from the least popular political figure to the most popular political figure because of this Pearl Harbor event. So whatever will happen next, and there's another aspect to this. Why the suitcase nukes? Why the idea that they would be flown over these major cities and to have some sort of a simultaneous death blow dealt to the major productive and financial centers and political centers of the United States, as this person is predicting? Well, I'm not really sure. If we look at the amount of money being pulled out of the United States and sent to foreign banks, now the institutional transfer of wealth is taking place under Bernanke and Geithner. The private, the connected people, like the people who were warned about 9/11 and didn't show up at work at the World Trade Center that day, the people who weren't institutions but were still connected or rich, in the know, so to speak, junior players and better. Those people they can't go through these institutional transfers of wealth out of the United States and into the Middle East or into Swiss banks. They had to go through somebody like Madoff, where their funds, you can't transfer such, millions and millions of dollars without attracting the attention of the IRS, without paying massive fees and duties and that type of thing, unless, of course, it is supposedly stolen from you in a fake Ponzi scheme. So Madoff is the guy who handled the private individual's transfer of funds somewhere else. But if you look at this massive offshoring of American productivity, even the chairman of Boeing, he's not talking about building, having a new factory for building jets in China. He has recently been talking about transferring the entire company lock, stock, and barrel to Red China. So doesn't it make you wonder about whatever this next quantum level increase in terror might be? Is it possible that this story is planting a seed in our heads so that when it happens, we are shocked into subservience, into giving up even more of our rights? It's a fascinating possibility.
The last roundup will continue in a moment.
Hello, I'm Rita Moreno. Some vision changes are normal. Some are due to eye disease. Do you know the difference? Open your eyes to the facts. To get more information about vision and aging, or to find out about what help is available if you're having vision problems, call Lighthouse International at 1-800-829-0500 or visit www.lighthouse.org.
We are. Man can be permitted to exist only in order to serve others. He must be nothing but a tool for the satisfaction of their needs. Self-sacrifice is the law of our age. The man who refuses to submit and to serve, the supreme egoist, is a man who must be destroyed.
Hi, Al. Greetings once again from sunny Wisconsin. Well, it's real nice weather here today, and the weather forecast says that we're supposed to have nice weather for the next week. We certainly can't complain about that. Since the weather is so nice here, it makes me wonder, why are so many people that I know coming down with strep throat and head colds and chest congestion and feeling really miserable. I wonder if the government is priming us or getting us ready for the real onset of some garbage they're going to dump into the atmosphere by the way of the chemtrails to get everyone to take their swine flu vaccine. No, I'm not paranoid. They are out to get us. And there is no conspiracy, but there is a plan. Well, I have an interesting article in front of me today. It's titled Deceit, Delusion, and the Destruction of America, written by Barrett Chose. That's K-J-O-S. Barrett starts the article out with a number of quotes from different sources, the first one being from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote, "A concentration of world evil, of hatred for humanity, is taking place, and it is fully determined to destroy your society." The next quote, "The social sciences will concern themselves with the rationalization of social control, the control of human behavior." That's from the Rockefeller Foundation President Max Mason. "The federal government is likely within weeks to emerge as the principal owner of a storied U.S. corporation. It will simultaneously serve as the company's regulator, tax collector, customer, pension backstop, and lender." That's from the Wall Street Journal. And from 2 Chronicles 20:12, we have, "O our God, we have no power against this great multitude that is coming against us, nor do we know what to do, but our eyes are upon you." A recent article in the Russian Pravda titled "American Capitalism Gone with a Whimper" has been spreading a somber view of America. Unlike its old Soviet-era namesake, this new Pravda may actually be telling the truth. Most of this message can be verified, as you will see in the links and facts that follow these excerpts. Then she starts out some of the excerpts. "The American descent into Marxism is happening with breathtaking speed against the backdrop of a passive, hapless sheeple. The initial testing grounds was conducted upon our holy Russia, and a bloody test it was. Those lessons were taken and used to properly prepare the American populace for the surrender of their freedoms and souls to the whims of their elites and betters. First, the population was dumbed down through a politicized and substandard education system based on pop culture. Americans know more about their favorite TV dramas than the drama in D.C. that directly affects their lives. They care more for their right to choke down a McDonald's burger than for their constitutional rights. Then their faith in God was destroyed until the churches were for the most part little more than Sunday circuses, and their televangelists and top Protestant mega-preachers were more happy to sell out their souls and flocks to be on the winning side of one pseudo-Marxist politician or another. The final collapse has come with the election of Barack Obama. His spending and money printing has been record-setting, not just in America's short history, but in the world. If this keeps up for more than another year, and there is no sign that it will not, America at best will resemble the Weimar Republic and at worst Zimbabwe. These men, of course, are not an elected panel, but made up of appointees picked from the very financial oligarchs and their henchmen who are now gorging themselves on trillions of American dollars in one bailout after another. They are also usurping the rights, duties, and powers of the American Congress. Again, Congress has put up little more than a whimper to their masters. The proud American will go down into his slavery without a fight, beating his chest and proclaiming to the world how free he really is. The world will only snicker. Barrett writes under the heading called The Hidden Oligarchs, "We have listed many of these transnational power brokers in a chronology of the revolutionary roots of the UN. Some are obvious participants in the 70-year-long partnership between Russian communism and leading American capitalists. As you ponder these examples, remember that today's transformation is no conspiracy theory. It is really happening." 1913. President Woodrow Wilson wrote, "Some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." 1919. After Lenin had established his bloody reign in Russia, Mandel House, President Wilson's main advisor, cabled the president the following message from Paris. "There have been published here statements made by American papers to the effect that Russia may be treated as an enemy. It is exceedingly important that such criticism should be suppressed." 1922. New York City Mayor John F. Hyland said in a speech on March 26th, "The real menace to our republic is this invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy length over city, state, and nation. Like the octopus of real life, it operates under cover of self-created screen. It seizes in its long and powerful tentacles our executive officers, our legislative bodies, our schools, our courts, our newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection." 1933. President Franklin Roosevelt, 1933, said, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the larger centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson." 1945. Julian Huxley, the first Director General of UNESCO, wrote, "The task before UNESCO is to help the emergence of a single world culture, and it is necessary, for at the moment, two opposing philosophies of life confront each other from the West and from the East. You may categorize the two philosophies as two supranationalisms, or as individualism versus collectivism, or as capitalism versus communism, or as Christianity versus Marxism. Can these opposites be reconciled? Through the inexorable dialectic of evolution, it must happen. If we are to achieve progress, we must learn to uncrystallize our dogmas." 1953. During a congressional investigation, Roland Gaither, president of the Ford Foundation, made this startling admission: We, at the executive level here, were active in either the OSS, which was the forerunner of the CIA, the State Department, or the European Economic Administration. During those times, and without exception, we operated under directives issued by the White House. We are continuing to be guided by just such directives, the substance of which were to the effect that we should make every effort to so alter life in the United States as to make possible a comfortable merger with the Soviet Union. 1966. Georgetown professor Carroll Quigley, Bill Clinton's distinguished mentor and a lecturer on Russian history at the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, wrote, "There does exist, and has existed for a generation, an international Anglophile network, which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the roundtable groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups, and frequently does so. I know of the operation of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records." One of Professor Quigley's most shocking revelations, wrote Dr. Stan Monteith, was the fact that the American Communist Party was partly financed by J.P. Morgan and Company. J.P. Morgan and his associates financed the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, conservative groups, liberal organizations, communist groups, and anti-communist organizations. The powers of financial capitalism have another far-reaching aim, continued Dr. Quigley, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. 2001. The Russians are building tremendous new nuclear, biological, and chemical weapon systems, all with the assistance of U.S. technology transfers. Further, the Russians are building huge underground nuclear bunkers and weapons production facilities in the Ural Mountains, clearly intended to function during a nuclear war. The U.S. intelligence community, under both Republican and Democratic administrations, knows this and are actively covering for the Russians, so the American people won't become alarmed. Both Republican and Democratic administrations have been supplying the Chinese with high-technology weapons systems for years, knowing that they, in turn, are supplying other enemies, such as Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, North Korea, as well. That was written by Joel Skousen. The next heading under Use the Media. Meanwhile, both parties have used the media to build and maintain a public perception of opposing positions on certain issues, while building consensus on issues that were critical to social change. Few have explained this communist-capitalist partnership better or exposed Soviet terrors more effectively than Alexander Solzhenitsyn. After criticizing Stalin in a letter to a friend, he was imprisoned for spreading anti-Soviet propaganda and served 8 years in a torturous Soviet labor camps. When he seemed to be dying of stomach cancer, he apparently returned to his Russian Orthodox faith. He was exiled to Kazakhstan and restored to health. In his 1976 book, Warning to the West, he tells us that there also exists another alliance, at first glance a strange one, a surprising one, but if you think about it, in fact, one which is well-grounded and easy to understand. This is the alliance between our communist leaders and your capitalists. This alliance is not new. The very famous Armand Hammer, who is flourishing here today, laid the basis for this when he made the first exploratory trip into Russia, still in Lenin's time, in the very first years of the revolution. He was extremely successful in this intelligence mission, and since that time, for all these 50 years, we observe continuous and steady support by the businessmen of the West of the Soviet communist leaders. Russia's clumsy and awkward economy, which could never overcome its own difficulties by itself, is continually getting material and technological assistance. The major construction projects in the initial 5-year plan were built exclusively with American technology and materials. And if today the Soviet Union has powerful military and police forces in a country which is by contemporary standards poor, They are used to crush our movement for freedom in the Soviet Union. Certain of your businessmen, on their own initiative, established an exhibition of criminological technology in Moscow. This was the most recent and elaborate technology which here, in your country, is used to catch criminals, to bug them, to spy on them, to photograph them, to tail them, to identify criminals. This was taken to Moscow to an exhibition in order that the Soviet KGB agents could study it, as if not understanding what sort of criminals would be hunted by the KGB. Lenin foretold this whole process. Lenin, who spent most of his life in the West and not in Russia, who knew the West much better than Russia, always wrote and said that the Western capitalists would do anything to strengthen the economy of the USSR. Through the decades of the 1920s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the whole Soviet press wrote, "Western capitalism, your end is near." But it was as if the capitalists had not heard, could not understand, could not believe this. Nikita Khrushchev came here and said, "We will bury you." They didn't believe that either. They took it as a joke. Now, of course, they have become more clever in our country. Now they don't say, "We are going to bury you" anymore. Now they say, "Détente." Nothing has changed in communist ideology. Well, what can we do? Solzhenitsyn shows us the basic problem, rejection of biblical truth and values. It is almost a joke now in the Western world, he reminds us, to use words like good and evil. They have become almost old-fashioned concepts, but they are very real. These are concepts from a sphere which is higher than us. Indeed they are. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, warned the Old Testament prophet Isaiah. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good, wrote the Apostle Paul. Yet biblical views of good and evil are fast disappearing from the American consciousness. They seem too intolerant and divisive in today's permissive postmodern culture. In contrast, the evil God warns us to shun is promoted everywhere, in books, movies, music, schools, ads, churches. Since it fits the universal cravings of human nature, its collective acceptance brings an illusion of unity. Our leaders have been promoting it, for it sets the stage for mass manipulation. The main strategy behind this transformation has been the dialectic process, group dialogue led by a trained facilitator toward an ever-evolving consensus. The result is a dumbed-down population of what Pravda called sheeple, blinded masses following false shepherds. Our nation, once famous for its faith, freedom, wisdom, and initiative, has learned to trust feelings instead of facts, opinions and impression instead of truth, and certain human cravings rather than God's authority, group consensus rather than God's word. Rejecting the shepherd, we lost our way. Solzhenitsyn points us to the solution. We have to recognize that the concentration of world evil and the tremendous force of hatred is there, and it's flowing from there throughout the world, and we have to stand up against it. Will we? They will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. But you be watchful in all things, 2 Timothy. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Ephesians. And when these things begin to happen, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draws nigh. Luke. And on that note, I will say, talk to you later, Al.
I guess Jim Traficant and Steve Magritz have something in common. They were both victims of the Gulag, and they shared that distinction with Mr. Solzhenitsyn. And in fact, the courage of Jim Traficant in bravely standing up to forces that were demanding that he compromise himself and admit to crimes that he didn't commit in order to shorten his jail sentence, he was having none of it because he was a man of principle and is a man of principle. Whether you disagree with him or not, you have to admire his courage and the fact that he destigmatized the Gulag.
I'm glad to be anywhere.
Besides prison, for one.
I come from 7 years up at Rochester. I want to say hello to Dre Maddox and Freddie McKnight and all those guys up there, a lot of good guys I met. They're sort of like family in a way. It's a different experience.
So you made friends in prison?
Absolutely. You know, Nelson Mandela made a statement. He said, if you really want to know the truth about a nation, you've got to go through their prisons. And believe me, he's right. And I learned an awful lot about America going through the prisons.
Before we get to prison and all about America, I have to ask you the headline question. Ready?
Don't say it.
I'm going to ask
because I'm
it.
going to get personal.
I'm going to ask
Get
it right
at me.
now.
Get at me, Greta.
All right. Are you going to run for Congress again?
I don't know yet. There's a lot of people that want me to run for Congress. You know, I was a #1 target of the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee and the #1 target of the Justice Department since 1983, being the only American to ever defeat him pro se in the RICO trial. And I have big enemies, but I have some grudges, and I want to go at them. I want to go at them big time, Greta. So I have to see, first of all, if I'm viable, and second of all, if the people would support me. They came in here and they fractured this district. They broke it up, certainly to make it tougher. I think they also felt they gave me a life sentence that I would never survive in prison. Then they came to me and said if I said I was guilty, I might even get a pardon. And I told them to shove the pardon up their derriere sideways. So here I am. And if I do run, get your best hold, because I will be running downhill with my tails flapping in the wing, wide open.
What are the odds you're going to win? I mean, not you're going to win. What are the odds you're going to run?
The odds, and I've saved all comment for your show, because #1, I think you have a great show. #2, I think you're fair, and that's not trying to patronize you. I know you're going to ask some tough questions, and I'm going to embarrass you before it's over. But I would say at this point it's 50-50, and I have a lot of people that are encouraging me to run because there's so many disenfranchised people, so many, especially in this area. And one of the concerns I have is I come home to is we have Delphi here, the salaried workers that were completely cut out and lost their pension benefits. It's going to be almost a $250 million impact to this general community. And when you look at it nationally, Dayton, Ohio is going to be hit real hard. The state of Ohio is going to get hit with about $1.5 billion in lost money, economic generation, because of this decision. And I feel, and you know my record, if we could take care of people all over the world, damn it, take care of those Delphi salaried workers, and I expect it to be done. I mean, I'm on your show here asking you and asking Mayor to look at this plight. Because we have here 9,500 workers. They're going to lose their pension benefits. They're going to have to pay for their hospitalization benefits. It's an immediate out-of-cost pocket of $50 million with a contributing factor of a multiplication of 2 for the general metropolitan area of $250 million impact on an economy that lost steel mills years ago and has been left behind.
All right. Grudges.
Can't have it.
Can't have it. I said, you said you had some grudges. Who are your grudges against?
Well, #1, and my wife constantly reminds me to tone down. I brought that guy back from Israel, John Deminick. It was my Freedom of Information Act which proved not only that he was innocent, but who Ivan really was. The case was so sensitive, members of Congress would say, Jim, I love you, but please don't involve me. I sent my evidence to the 6th Circuit Court in Cincinnati. They wouldn't accept it. I finally sent it over to Israel, to the Israeli Supreme Court, and they called me over there, and I went with the family. I did a live interview, satellite, with Brian Gumbel, and I said, when they put this innocent man to death, they're going to lose $15 to $20 billion every year they get from the American taxpayers. And Brian Gumbel says, what are you talking about? They only get $3 billion. And I said, Brian, that's only the foreign aid bill. Look at all the other trade compacts, economic assistance, military assistance. I'm saying this to you right now. Israel gets approximately $15 billion a year from the American taxpayers. That $15 billion is $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. And people in my district are losing their pension benefits. So I was targeted big time.
By the Israelis.
The Israeli Supreme Court looked at the evidence, could not refute it. And it came from the Justice Department, Greta. And they said, take him home. I brought him home, and he was bombarded ever since.
Home to Ohio.
Now he's in Germany fighting for his life. Now let me say this. Prosecutor Moskowitz of the OSI Office of the United States Justice Department suborned perjury with Otto Horn. The documents clearly state who Ivan the Terrible was, a man named Ivan Marchenko, not Demyanjuk. And they had to release him. And now they can't live with it. They couldn't live with Jim Trafficant, having beaten him in 1983. That was a walking symbol of defiance. And now they have this man in Germany. And if someone doesn't look into this, the American people should be ashamed of themselves. When you allow one American to be violated, you threaten the freedoms of every American. And I can't understand this, why no one in Congress is raising their voice. And the reason is very simple. And this may be you don't want to hear, I don't know. And I certainly don't want to hurt you on your show. You have one of the best. You're fair. But I believe that Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars of which we have little or no interest. Our children are coming back in body bags. Our nation is bankrupt over these wars. And if you open your mouth, you get targeted. And if they don't beat you at the poll, they'll put you in prison.
All right, two quick things. One is the Israelis released Demyanjuk back to the United States, right?
The Israeli Supreme Court, and I give them credit.
Give them credit.
I give them credit, big time.
All right, the second thing is Israel is a democracy and is our ally.
Yes,
right?
they are.
So you have no...
And they should be our ally. Okay. They are our friends over in that troubled part of the world.
So explain to me what you see as, why you target or why you have a grudge against the Israelis.
The grudge is not necessarily a grudge. It's an objective assessment that no one will have the courage to speak about. They're controlling much of our foreign policy. They're influencing much of our domestic policy. Wolfowitz, as Undersecretary of Defense, manipulated President Bush #2 back into Iraq. They pushed definitely to try and get Bush before he left to move into Iran. We're conducting an expansionist policy of Israel, and everybody's afraid to say it. They control much of the media, they control much of the commerce of the country, and they control powerfully both bodies of the Congress. They own the Congress.
Are you an anti-Semite?
No, I'm not. That's exactly what they're going to say, and I expect that. What I am is an American. And you see, I think America comes first. And we have a one-sided foreign policy in the Mideast. And we've alienated Arabs who have fighting. So what they've done, and I predicted this on the House floor, is they would export violence to America. And they have. They have no other way to fight. I think President Obama knows this. I think he sees this. I think he wants to do something. I think his hands are tied. And I think he's dancing between the raindrops trying to figure how I can politically machinate some scenario to mitigate these problems. Greta, I'm saying this. America is in danger if America doesn't take back the government without foreign influence.
Well, I guess when they have basically tarred you the way they have people like Jim Trafficant, in a way, it frees you to say the things that most people won't say.
The last Roundup is a presentation of Radio National.
I'm heading for the last Roundup. Gonna saddle old pain for the last time and ride. So long, old pal, it's time your tears were dry. I'm heading for the last Roundup. Get along, little doggy, get along, get along, get along, little doggy, get along. Get along, little doggy, get along, little doggy, get along, little doggy, get along. I'm heading for the last Roundup. To the faraway ranch of the boss in the sky, where the strays are counted and branded, there go